AI is playing a role in everything from directing our attention to deciding who gets mortgages to solving complex human problems. There's a few key areas here, from privacy. Our personal data powers everything from traffic maps to targeted advertising. Fairness impact. We've seen time and time again that historical bias can show up in automated decision making. Trust, as I said, algorithms on sites like YouTube often push people towards extreme misleading content because it's going to drive more hours watched. Safety, experts have raised the alarm that AI could increase safety risks and cybercrime. And transparency. Automated decisions can have a huge personal impact, yet the reasons for these decisions are often opaque, like in the case of bail bonds, how much they borrow from different people. So what is trustworthy AI? Mozilla is working to help ensure that the use of AI in consumer technology enriches our lives. We've done a lot of thinking about what it looks like and have come up with a definition of trustworthy AI that's encompassed by two key concepts: agency and accountability. Human agency is a core part of how AI is built and designed. Users should be aware of AI as it is affecting them, and they should shape how and whether they interact with it. Ultimately, trustworthy AI should emphasize privacy, transparency, and human well-being. The challenge is people often don't know when or how they interact with AI. We lack meaningful consent, and often our personal data is used in ways that we might not expect. There are myriad ways that we can hold companies accountable. Work that my colleagues and I are doing daily. But CS students like you have the unique power to shape the culture and ethical frameworks of companies developing AI. There's also an enormous potential for AI. It's not all fear and fear-mongering. AI can help solve medical mysteries and simplify lots of complex problems. Already tech workers are asking questions and organizing when they are asked to build products that are antithetical to their values. As students who might be interested in a career in tech, the issues you're thinking about and discussing today will affect the ways in which tech is developed in the future. So as Anu mentioned, this is a part of a series of campus conversations that Mozilla is hosting on this topic, and your feedback is extremely valuable. So I think there's going to be a survey link handed out at the end that we'd really appreciate you taking the time to give us your feedback. We're really happy to have the other speakers here, and let them introduce themselves.
Sure.
Who's next?
Anne, would you like to say a few words? Anne is an artist and a tech worker.
Hi, I'm Anne. I am an artist and a tech worker and an activist. So I've worked in tech I still work in tech, so I've worked in tech for about 10 years. I started at Google. I was at Google for 7 years, started at YouTube, and then moved to Google Glass and then to Sidewalk Labs. I saw a lot of the issues really up close, firsthand. Tech is pretty racist, it's pretty sexist, that's just what the industry is like, and then because of that, a lot of that culture gets embedded into the technologies that we're building and the decisions that leadership teams are making about what type of technology to build and who it should serve. So a lot of tech worker organizing happening, tech workers who are not happy with the industry for many reasons, for the way workers are treated, workplace conditions of the workers themselves, and of the technology that we are being asked to build, which we don't feel is ethical or is something that we should be putting, we shouldn't be putting profits over people. However, just because it is a for-profit company, a lot of these companies, their desires are often at complete odds with ours, and so that makes it even more important to organize as tech workers so that we have a collective voice that pushes back against what the people in power are telling us to do. So I organize with tech workers. I still do that. If you're interested, I highly encourage you to come and talk to me. I would love to get more students interested in this earlier, because students have a lot of power. There's a lot of campus organizing happening already, and I'd love to talk to you all more about that and talk about how we can support you and how you can support us as well.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll definitely be talking about that after Jason's presentation. So if you could introduce yourself and then want to come this way? Yeah, sure. Take the other route.
Hi, so hi everyone. I'm Okay. So everyone, my name is Jason. I'm a computer science researcher at Mozilla. I did my PhD in computer science at Stanford, and I did my postdoc at University of Washington, and I finished about 4 years ago. And since then, I spent a couple of years in the startup world, and I'm now with Mozilla looking at transparency for AI. And my area of research is in the intersection of human-computer interaction and artificial intelligence. I was usually part of both labs. And more specifically, I build tools to help people verify and interrogate AI. So there was the hopes that we can trust AI more and make better use of artificial intelligence algorithms. And to make my points a bit more concrete, I'll go into, so this is sort of like a quick agenda. I'm trying to keep this under 10 minutes, so I'm actually going through this really fast. And this is actually my first time trying to pack this into 10 minutes. And this is actually an upcoming talk I'm giving at MisinfoCon. So bear with me if this is a little still a bit talking work in progress. But I will first go through what I mean by verify, interrogate. I'll use a very specific example from translation to help you understand, to sort of bring the point of what it means to build tools to verify, interrogate AI. And I'll go from a translation of what happens when machines make not just one translation mistake, but when it makes a billion mistranslations, and what is the impact on our lives. And I'll go into how in our everyday lives we interact with AI. And I'll talk about sort of the impact on us physically, when we travel a billion miles, or when we have personalized ads on the web. And I'll talk a little bit more about the transparency efforts that we're doing at Mozilla right now. So I'll start with an example for translation. So all of us have sort of different ideas of what artificial intelligence means. It could be the killer robot in Ex Machina, to some other algorithm that we don't even have a shape or form. So I'm going to use translation to make the example a bit more concrete. And this is the kind of things that you can do these days. If you're traveling or just even here, you can point your phone at a menu, and Google can translate the menu into a language that you understand. So I hope we all agree this is one type of artificial intelligence. But when you look at this thing, I don't know if you've ever wondered. So I actually just flew back from Taiwan last night. And every now and then, in Asia, I'll see signs like this that basically run right next to a cliff. And the sign says, please fall into the water carefully. I'm just thinking, what does the original sign mean? Does it really mean to jump off the cliff and fall into the water carefully? Or does the sign say something else? So I don't know if you ever wondered that. So how do we trust the translation that Google gives us? And this is Google Translate. I imagine most of you have used this tool. I see a lot of nods and hands. So if I type in a phrase full of beans, this is one possible translation in German. This is another possible translation in German. I don't know if you guys have any idea which one should we trust more. And so this is actually one of the projects that I worked on 10 years ago when I interned at Google. This is actually, 10 years ago, this is all you get with Fuko Translate. The tool I built is actually the part on the bottom right hand side. So when you translate a word for beans to German, and excuse my German pronunciation, into Aufgekratzt, you can now see, click on the word, you can see the translation. It can tell you that it translates back to English as full of beans, but it can also mean in high spirits, and these are all the other words that, all the other possible translations. And given this is sort of a 10-minute talk, I don't have the time to go into the details of all the designs that went into this. But very briefly, some of the things that this tool does is it provides real-time feedback. So while you're working and needing a verification, the tool will give you some feedback. It gives you a way to verify it. So it can actually give you parts of speech. So do you mean full of beans as a can full of beans? Or do you mean a kid who's very high-spirited, is very energetic, who just woke up from a nap and you couldn't, calm down at all? So one is the noun, one is the adjective. So this is right away give you a sense which one of the two translations Google Translate might have picked up. And the tool gives you reverse translation. So it turns something that, depending on whether you speak German, back into English and hopefully a language that you can understand. And when I say interrogate, I mean we don't just check the one output that Google Translate gives us, But this tool now gives you this whole list of synonyms. So instead of translating to the output that Google Translate gives you, you can actually click on that and just explore what are all the other outputs, all the other possible translations, and get a feel for yourself whether or not this is actually the translation you want. And we also have some usage data to help you get a sense of maybe which is the right usage you want. So these are the type of tools that I built for the last 10 years doing my PhD and doing my postdoc. And so just give you a sense, so just the first two takeaways of how do we trust AI algorithms. I will argue the first thing is anytime AI gives you a result, we should be able to verify that result with the fact that we know, translate it into a language that we understand and verify with something that we know. And we should be able to interrogate and analyze all the possible outcomes that the AI is giving us. And so this is sort of what happens with one translation. And the question I posed at the beginning of the talk is what happens when we make 1 billion mistranslations? So Google Translate is used by about 500 million users, I believe. This is actually data from about 4 years ago, so it's probably even more popular now. And I believe it translates about, actually I don't have my notes here, several billion words just per day. And what is the cause of that? Well, one possible thing is, if you have an important document, an actual legal contract, if you are developing a marketing campaign, you want to translate your marketing campaign, to a different language and deploy that in a different country, you probably don't want to put it through Google Translate, just print out the results. And a lot of the translation these days still happen through human translators. And historically, human translators or human professional translators are paid by words translated. And during my research on machine translation, 10 years ago in the last decade, we noticed there's a new business model called post-edit. So rather than paying professional translators by the words translated, business started giving professional translators the Google Translate output and want to pay them by the number of words corrected. And do you guys want to take a guess what happened? Yes?
Correct everything.
That's a very, very good point. So to make it more concrete, this is a very informal poll that we got on the web. What would you want translators? We want to know, what do you think of post-editing? And about most of them would rather go to the dentist than do post-editing. And again, this is a 10-minute talk, so I don't have time to go into the details. In our own results, we did notice how translators are spending more time correcting the document than starting from scratch. But more concretely, when researchers conduct an experiment, not asking, but actually testing what is a fair rate or a fair wage that the translators would take an actual post-editing job, they generally have to pay up to 110% before translators will actually take a post-editing job. In a controlled lab environment using professional translating tools, translators spend about 90%, up to 90% of the time correcting Google Translate as they do starting the translation from scratch. But they are paid as low as 40% of the wage that they earned before. And our hypothesis is basically takes the same amount of time to comprehend the same document, but they are now being paid for the actual typing they're doing. So this is one way AI can impact us with 1 billion mistranslated words. And let me go so the third point that I want to bring up to you guys as you're going to computer science is AI is a tool. It can be a tool to help you, traveling in a foreign country to understand the signage better, order your food better. But at the end of the day, it's only a tool. So when we are looking at AI, we want to understand whether we can trust it. We also should ask for what is the AI being used for, and what is the purpose of deploying this tool. And so let me go to my next example of the cost of 1 billion miles traveled. I don't know how many of you guys here have used either Uber or Lyft or another car sharing app. I see almost everybody's hand almost went up. So this is 2008 when Uber first pitched their idea to VCs. They actually, in their slide deck, they actually say, they are going to use algorithms or intelligent algorithms to better utilize vehicle resources to reduce congestions in the cities. And among other things, for example, they actually say they are supposed to lower the rates, but that's another thing. But I'm going to focus on the part where by controlling all the vehicles, they can actually make vehicles run more efficiently. This is what they said in 2008, and since then investors have asked them to increase profit among other things. And as of earlier this year, when Uber and Lyft commissioned a study, their own study actually found that this is actually an article from the Washington Post. That's why it's talking about the district. And their study also very conveniently excluded New York City just because it might be an outlier in the data set. In any case, in the 6 cities they studied, that they actually found Uber and Lyft is causing traffic congestions because so many people are now driving the cars around, waiting for to pick up passengers, and 43% of the time, an Uber and Lyft vehicle is actually empty or doesn't even have a passenger because they're waiting for people to pick up a passenger. And in fact, this is the head of Uber, Uber's head of global policy. They actually commented the actual phrase, Uber and Lyft are likely contributing to an increase in congestion. So this is not an example where you have a mathematical algorithm. In theory, you can optimize it for anything, but based on whatever the business is optimizing for, it can lead to a different outcome than what you want. And at least in this case, and when we start looking at verification, interrogation at scale, it requires data. And at least in this case, Uber and Lyft share the data so that a third party can commission a study and study this. And I'm going to go to the next example on how we can do some of these verifications. And so the next example that I'm going to use is ads on Facebook. So how many of you have opened either Facebook or Instagram today? I see almost everybody's hands went up. So hopefully this is another AI that's touching us, almost everybody now. And so this is actually, what happened to my internet? Yeah, internet stuff. I can also see if I can just use my phone and. Sorry about it. It's real. Okay. Sorry about that. So again, this is a talk in progress. I haven't prepared this for very well. This box. Not reloading. Not interesting. Oh no. I may have a PDF version that I can use. Let me see if I can just use that instead. Sorry, I should. Okay. No worries. I'm going to do this. This works. Okay. So this slide deck might be slightly different just because this is a backup that I made a while back. So this is actually an ad that I just saw earlier today, from Citadel Careers, and this is an ad that I saw on Facebook earlier today. And as you click on it, you might be able to click on this button here. You might be able to see an explanation that says this. Why am I seeing this ad? It gives you a list of reasons. Do you want to take a guess of what are some of the factors that might affect why I'm seeing this ad and not other people in this room? Go ahead.
How long you've been employed at your current employer according to Facebook?
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely one thing. Anybody want to take other guesses?
Browsing history.
Sorry?
Browsing history.
Yeah. Browsing history. And so Facebook actually does have, well, at least you can probably infer the first piece of data, and definitely have our browsing history, not just on Facebook.com, but very often across the entire web, a large number of sites. Yeah. And so some of the other factors that researchers have found are actually the ad budget. How much the advertiser spend on the ad actually affects who sees the ad. Does anybody want to take a guess when the ad budget affects who sees the ad? Go ahead.
You're going to show it to more people.
Not quite. It's a bit more nuanced than that. Do you want to? Yeah.
More specific types of data?
Yeah, so there's a specific data. And so there's a part where, let me put it this way. So Facebook allows advertisers to bid on any number of users. And it turns out there are more products aimed, for example, at women than men on Facebook. And so when advertisers bid on this, just because of supply and demand, it actually costs more to advertise to women than to men. And depending on the advertising budget, if your budget falls off the threshold below where you can deliver ads to women, Facebook will just deliver employment ad to men. Because, for example, this is just more convenient for men. It's obviously more profitable to them because if they had shown a job ad like the one I just saw to women, it will display a higher value ad. There's gender stereotypes that we talked about. And I mean, this is not related to budgeting, but gender stereotypes means Facebook will actually analyze the type of ad to see who might most likely click on that. And there's also the part where none of this is actually determined by the advertisers. This is just done by Facebook's algorithm alone. And this is actually from a paper that was just published earlier this year. So just give you guys a minute to read the researchers' finding. Yeah, so basically, the gender stereotypes is that Facebook will analyze the ad and determine whether or not, for ads that are in the lumber industry, send it to 90% white and those 90% male audience, and they send, for example, 85% supermarket ads to women. And all of this is done because of this is an actual experiment that the researchers conducted on Facebook. They placed the ads and they made sure that they did not specify any particular targeting criteria. And this is just all of the so-called artificial intelligence in the algorithm that try to make the ad delivery more efficient for the business. And so moving onward. So previously I mentioned the study about Uber and Lyft, where the company shared the data. Right now, we're still trying to figure out how to get this data about Facebook, how to better understand how Facebook targets users. So at Mozilla, we had a few transparency efforts. I was involved in a couple of them in the last year, one for the US midterms and one for the European parliamentary election earlier this year. And for both instances, we try to show users how they are being targeted as an election comes up. But both of our projects fell short, mostly because we could not get any of the data from the platforms. And given this is talk at MisInfoCon, there will actually be Facebook and Google representatives, so I'm trying to use this slide to engage in conversation with them. But for you guys, the takeaway is, we can start thinking about as you're moving along in your career, the kind of things you're building. Just keep in mind, like the things that we're talking about earlier on in terms of how we trust AI. One of the things that we're really lacking right now is a transparency into what a lot of these AI is doing in a lot of different companies. And with that said, so thank you very much. And yeah, and here's the feedback form that was mentioned earlier on. Yeah, sure.
So now we're just gonna talk about some of the stuff we just looked at. I think one thing interesting that I was actually thinking of when we were listening to that is the fact it's the different types of data that are being used. There's the argument that public data, like what's used, the traffic congestion data that's used with Uber and Lyft, doesn't fall into the same ethical categories as private data, as something like metadata from a social network. I guess the question I'm just going to throw out to all of you guys is, what would you say to people who argue that this is just collateral damage and it's still in process, and that basically why is it important to consider ethical dilemmas as even with these things that are still in development, like AI programs that are still in development?
What is collateral damage? You mean?
So I suppose the fact in the Facebook ad campaign example, the idea that it's something that's still being worked on, and that the kinks need. And with YouTube as well, we saw that there was a lot of apologizing from YouTube,
right?
Instead of concrete solutions. So what's the argument that you're making that this is something that needs to be talked about now, and something that's urgent?
So, how many people here are familiar with the kind of issues with YouTube's algorithm? Only a few. Okay, so long story short, YouTube was going for this targeted number of 1 billion hours viewed. I don't know if it's per day or per year, but throughout the world. The one driving metric was to get a ton of people watching YouTube for as long as possible. And in the quest for that, they optimized for showing people like follow-up videos that are the most likely to get people to kind of get hooked. And that eventually drove to really kind of extremist content. If you started a video that's something really innocent and get to like wild conspiracy theories. And it's important to talk about this stuff today because, well, like something that came to mind when Jason was presenting about, having a singular focus can have this impact elsewhere. Like, look at the issue with the climate. Pure capitalism has just led us to this spot where companies that are focusing on nothing other than money have got us to a place where our environment is just almost irreparably damaged because they haven't been thinking about anything else. So we need to get ahead of this type of stuff now to be able to prevent, apocalypse like that in the future.
And in the context of advertising, at least for example for political advertising, there are actual laws and regulations, at least in the US, about campaign financing disclosures for print, for radio, for television, for mass mailing list, for just about every type of media except for online advertising. And in the last few elections in the US, for example, in the last one, there were two major candidates. One ran about, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, I'm sorry, about 60,000 ads, the other ran about 6 million different ads. So the question becomes, what are the 6 million different messages that the candidate is saying? We have absolutely no visibility into that. And built on top of the part about how Facebook is maximizing or optimizing for engagement and profit, the more viral, quote unquote viral an ad is, the cheaper it is actually to advertise on Facebook because people click on it and Facebook say, oh, this is a good ad that goes viral. So you can actually place ads that are more extreme, that gets people's reactions, very strong reactions, and you can actually pay less to deliver that certain type of messaging. We have no visibility into that. Facebook has promised that they are going to deliver an ad library to help researchers study that. We actually published earlier this year, reported actually in the Times that the library is completely broken. Researchers still cannot get access to that. And so these are the things that really should be regulated. I mean, there is already regulation, but and it's impacting our lives as we live it today, not just in the US, but in multiple countries around the world. The Canadian election is happening today, in fact. And for example, the Globe and Mail, one of the largest newspapers in Toronto, just found out that, for example, one of the parties is setting up a bunch of attack ads in multiple languages, and Facebook is not even catching them because for whatever reason, and so we have no idea whether this is just an anecdote that the journalists happen to come across this one ad that's targeted to a user, or this is a wider pattern. We have no idea. And the things different about digital advertising versus traditional advertising is if you place an ad on television, on a radio station or newspaper, everybody can see it, whether or not you are the intended audience. But on Facebook, you can target as few as less a dozen people. Nobody else in the whole world will even know that you send a particular message to this particular group of people. And I think that is a big problem for our society, for democracy and for our society.
I mean, when we say collateral damage like that, those words just like, I can't even comprehend that because who is being damaged? It's mostly Black and brown communities, it's mostly marginalized people that are feeling the effects of this more so than, and the people who are saying, oh, that's collateral damage are the people that are protected, who are privileged, that are us as tech workers, wealthy tech workers, that we can just look at our algorithms and say like, whatever, but like we're not living in the communities that are affected by these things that we're building. And that's like a huge problem. So just saying it's collateral damage and saying it's going to get better later, I think is really lazy and very dangerous. And that these are actual people's lives. People are dying because of some of these things that we're building, and that matters. Kind of reminds me of like a few months ago, I work in a co-working space now with I'm at a tech company, and I overheard like somebody in the tech space like next to me talking about Uber drivers and saying like, oh, like because of, the way Uber's changing their pricing, there's been like a rash of driver suicides, and they were just like, well, that's too bad, but I guess that's progress. And that was like, how could you say that? Like, people are literally dying, and you're saying that that's progress. And I want to say also about the ad targeting. There was a study done by, I believe, LaTanya Sweeney is the professor's name at Harvard, about this same issue with Google Ads, like in 2005 or something. So it's like, this is not a new issue that suddenly we need to talk about. This has been an issue forever. People have been talking about this forever, and people are just not listening, and because it's not profitable. Like you were saying with YouTube, it's more profitable to put the extremist content out there than it is to actually talk about how can we fix these issues.
Sure. And I feel like you guys have experience in a bunch of different fields in this industry, but you were saying that you overheard that and found it egregious, and are there any instances where you've worked at a company and seen a huge violation of some sort of ethical framework, and not been able to do anything about it, or felt that you didn't have any purchase?
Yeah, I mean, all the time.
Yeah.
There's small personal things that happen where you're actually witnessing racism or sexism happening between coworkers, and then you reporting that to HR, and HR does not care. That is not what their job is. It's not to protect workers, it's to protect the company. And then, so there's things like that. And then working at Sidewalk Labs was this is incredibly unethical. The things they're talking about with privacy, and that's kind of why I was fired/left, was because we just very, very much diverged on what matters and how to care about people and how to build ethical technology.
Sure. And do you guys have any experiences where?
Nothing jumps to mind. Combination of I've been at, Mozilla is a nonprofit. My first job in tech was a nonprofit. Before that, I was at a fintech company, but wasn't as aware of these issues. Also, cis white guy, probably not noticing as much, frankly. So I don't have any examples there, but I'm definitely aware of what I might not be seeing.
Yeah, for sure.
And then, I would just add to that, just in terms of just even the people who can make it into a tech company is already a very select group.
Yeah.
And that has multiple factors. One of the things is that computer science is now a very highly desirable major in the US to study, and because of that, a lot of schools are at capacity. And what I mean by at capacity is, my data is from about 4 years ago. If you look at all the Carnegie One schools, which there are about 190 in the US, and about 170 of them offer computer science classes. These are the schools that have a research program. Of these schools, the failure rate of the first intro to computer science class is actually over 50%. And the reason for that is there are so many people wanting to go into computer science that if they admitted everybody to second year, they simply don't have any capacity to take all the students. So they literally have to weed out half the students. And when you weed out half the students so aggressively, that makes any student who have any sort of advantage going into first year, basically will retain a lot of those students over the other students. And so just sort of a random poll, decide how many of you actually studied computer science in high school, or is your school had a computer science class? So I see about a quarter of the hands go up. And so in the US, because high schools are funded by local property tax, there are only about 11%, less than 11% of high schools that actually offer computer science courses. So even in this room, having about a quarter of students having taken computer science in high school is really not quite as representative. And those students are more likely to pass introduction to computer science. So we're already biasing one type of students. In other schools, for example, because by the time, by second, third year, they are already at capacity, a lot of schools now we're starting to send out letters so that they basically tell students that if you are transfer students, you will not be able to major in computer science. And this is what happens is a lot of students, for example, if because of family, finance issues, you have to go to, for example, community college or work part-time before you transfer to a full-time 4-year college, you are just cut out of the system because there's already capacity. You didn't, make the first year introduction to computer science class. There are other things. A lot of the classes, a lot of people in, for example, urban areas families are more aware of what computer science is. In a lot of the more rural areas in the US, if you go to Tennessee, you go to Arkansas, a lot of people don't even know computer science is a major that they can go into, and that is going to very likely take over 50% of engineering in the US over the next 20 years. They have no idea. If they found that out in second year, they already passed the chance to go into computer science. If you are the first person in your family to go to college, chances are you may not even be aware of that you have to declare your major in first year for some of the, especially in computer science in some colleges because it's so competitive. You're just cut out of the system. If you are somebody who's, for example, a veteran who's entering, college not as somebody who just finished high school, but you're going, maybe may have been deployed, you come back again, you're cut out of the system. So the people who can even study computer science is already a very select group. So I just want to keep that in mind when we're talking about all these biases, that there's a big part of the population that that may not even be able to enter a tech company.
For sure. And yeah, actually before we move on, I also wanted to ask you guys about the fact that there's so many inherent biases in institutions of higher learning in the United States. What, in your opinion, do you think that universities can do to prioritize this? Prioritize not only biases against who gets to enter the field, but the tendency to, because it's so competitive, to maybe overlook ethical questions when you get a job offer or whatever. But what do you guys think about that? It's a loaded question.
Yeah, I mean, it's akin to like hiring and tech questions.
No, for sure, yeah.
Also its own, next problems. That being said, I think that, in the efforts to improve like hiring in tech and more diverse hiring, universities should make sure that they're taking the same kind of best practices from companies trying to do their best, and blind reviews of applications, things like that, and considering everything from like extracurricular activities in high school are even being able to do them is coming from a point of privilege. So it's there's just so many layers to this. And
yeah, for sure.
I'm nowhere near the college admissions process.
Yeah.
So it's hard to give suggestions there, but it's just a lot of factors to consider.
Is there anything that can be done on a curriculum basis, do you think?
Definitely teaching and requiring ethics to be a class is like the baseline of what you could do. And then I know that a lot of universities, Stanford and others, for my company, we spoke to Brown earlier this year, and they do the same thing. I'm sure NYU does. They create courses that are partnered with industry. So, and those courses are geared to either like they're teaching a platform-specific thing and kind of like pre-indoctrinating the students, or because it's like an industry co-shaped course. Like obviously, if you think of like the industry wants those students to like want to work there later, and so that's highly problematic. So, and this is like, there's a lot of like who gets the funding and a lot of like things that go into that, but like not having industry sponsored courses or to really like talk about the issues with the industry would be step one.
For sure. And I was also gonna say, I think, so you were talking about how you deferred very greatly on an ethical violation with a company and left because you felt like there was nothing else to do. But are there any concrete steps that someone could take as a student entering the workforce for the first time to not only prioritize ethics in whatever work we're doing, but also make it a point to discover if there's an ethical framework in the company you're working in, engage with that in a meaningful way? Is there any advice you would give?
I do believe a lot in talking to your coworkers. They're in every company, including like the highly problematic ones like Palantir. There are people who are organizing internally and thinking about these issues, and so like as you're entering these companies, trying to connect with them and like find out from them what they've already been doing and what else they want to be doing is like step one. Something that I think a lot about is not just complaining, but like figuring out how to turn complaining into action, because it's very easy to just complain with your coworkers or your friends about the issues that you're seeing.
Right.
It's much harder to turn that into real conversations about how we're going to organize and how we're going to like push forward the change we want to see. So I would encourage you to, you know, keep your eyes open, be super aware of these issues. Like, I'm not going to say don't work in tech, as I think that's unrealistic for many reasons, but if you're going to go into tech, like, be super aware of these issues, be thinking about them, be reading about them, talk to your coworkers, talk to folks who are organizing, like myself, or others who can help get you plugged in, and yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And, you know, even before going into a company, like, take calls from, you know, when you're doing interviews, ask these questions. Even if it's a company you don't want to work for. I got reached out to by a Facebook recruiter a couple of months ago, and like they're just so far gone in the privacy violation world that you know, there's no chance I'm going to go there. I still took the call with a recruiter because I wanted to get a little bit of an idea of what they were trying to do, because it was some new interesting opportunity, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to like plant in their ears that like people that you're trying to hire care about this stuff, because saying something is, you know, better than just ignoring them completely. A few months later, I saw an article about Facebook having trouble recruiting, and they talked to recruiters who were like, yeah, people care about this stuff. So it works. You know, I talked to even another company, it was like Harry's or something like that, which not in the AI space, but I still like at some point I talked to the recruiters like, what are you doing around sustainability?
Yeah.
And you know, just having these conversations. And again, I recognize I'm coming from this from a spot of privilege of like having a good job in the industry, that, you know, of an organization that is really trying to do well, to do good. But you know, it doesn't mean that you have to be combative and like put them off from wanting to hire you if you are kind of strategic about, you know, when you're asking questions, who you're asking them to, understanding if there is opportunity for you to make change happen once you've joined the company.
I mean, I don't know if this example is going to make sense. Sometimes I think sort of more historically back to, you know, before we had computer science, what was before computer science? And like if you sort of look back to the last century, let's take another engineering field, say chemical engineering as an example. I mean, chemical engineering did offer us a whole bunch of new things. For example, we have plastics. Like, I don't know if any of you guys can imagine living without plastics these days. It's, you know, I mean, I can't even imagine. But at the same time, while we are having convenience of plastics, we now have all these little thrown in business of, you know, plastics is covering, you know, I forgot even what is the size of, like, France or something in the Pacific Ocean now, like the entire flow team, you know, plastic particles. So sometimes I think of AI as one of these things. Like, it does have its benefit if used right. But at the same time, I want to sort of think about what happens when you use that at industry scale, and what is it that you're actually building, and are you using it for good, or are you just using it because a company will profit from it? I think I think maybe I know it sounds very, very meta and very theoretical, but I mean that might be a starting point. And I mean, it took decades for the environmental movement to pick up steam. And I'm hoping that we can have a conversation now so that, you know, whatever is going to fall out of AI, we start thinking about it, whether it's privacy issues or other things. I mean, a lot of these things, you know, it may not be something that we can't even imagine right now, because, you know, a century ago, people probably didn't even think there's going to be plastic covering the entire Pacific Ocean, the size of France. Right. So, you know, things we probably can't even imagine what are the things that are going to happen with when we deploy AI. Even more pervasively, but we should at least start thinking about it, and think about who's benefiting from all this technology.
If you do end up at one of these companies, because, you know, and I don't blame you for, like, you need a job when you're graduating school, like, consider how you can continue to make change. A lot of them have charitable donation matching, so you can donate to organizations that are doing this, you know, fighting the good fight, and then your company will actually match that donation.
Exactly. Like, infiltrate the, you know, whatever. I feel like that's definitely something that students generally is on their mind. I know a lot of people who are interested in academia or are engaged in academia that are like sidelined by whatever whatever barriers to entry there are in that field, and then find themselves in a less idealistic space in industry. So I think yeah, the acknowledging that it's something is a good start. But I also wanted to ask you your own experience right now. So is there an ethical framework at each of the companies you work at? Is there some sort of like solid thing that you know that if you have a problem you can confront it? Yeah, start.
So I am now at an AI infrastructure startup. I think I mentioned that before. There's not an ethical framework. There are like a set of values that the CEO came up with by himself. It has been definitely challenging to figure out how to organize at a startup because it's just very small.
Yeah.
So there, like, even if you find a group of like-minded people, it's like hard to then turn that into meaningful action. So mostly what it's been is like me and like a couple others that we talk about issues that we see and we speak up against like things that we think are egregious, like wanting to work with Palantir or Anduril, and we're like, nope, like definitely not going to do that. But then there's other things where like they want to work with an oil and gas company, and I'm like, I'm not okay with that, but it seems to be moving forward, and I'm not really sure like how to stop that. So I feel like there is not an ethical framework. I keep pushing for us to make clear decisions on how, especially being a platform, like who we want to accept onto this platform. This is not a democracy, it's a private company. We can say like you're not allowed on our platform if that is what we want, but we haven't done that yet. And so that is definitely challenging. I will continue to talk to the people I work with and try to push for that, but no framework right now.
Sure.
This is a little bit of a weird question because, I work at the Mozilla Foundation, which is the nonprofit that is if you want to get into the tax game, the single shareholder in the Mozilla Corporation, which makes like Firefox and stuff.
Yeah.
And we exist to push this mission of a healthy internet. So it's not like, yes, like the whole organization is built around that. There's not there's no we need to make money at whatever cost. It's we're a nonprofit that exists to fight this stuff.
But its association with this multinational corporation. Do you ever, or like, is there ever any concern with, if the Mozilla Corporation does something, is it out of our control?
No, I mean they're so tightly bound to the mission that it's like that from the highest levels. I feel like, and you can probably speak to this better than I can, being on the corporation side.
Yeah, I mean, being on the corporation side, so I actually work for Firefox Engineering, and we're basically 100% owned by a foundation. So unlike other companies that have shareholders that might want to, that might be from Wall Street who want to maximize profit, our shareholder basically asks us to
help advocate for healthy
and uphold the Mozilla mission. So that's why I have the freedom to work on projects like, so I built a tool called Ad Analysis for Facebook that unfortunately got disabled by Facebook for the US midterms. And for the European Parliament election, I built a EU Ad Transparency report. And even though neither one's profitable, it was highly supported by both management, and I get to work with people both within Firefox Engineering and also have support from the foundation because I have a lot of advocacy folks, policy and advocacy folks. So it was great, it's a great culture. I mean, I really enjoy working in such a culture. And
kind of example here, the funny little story is an email that went out today. We're launching an ad campaign, I think tomorrow, about online tracking or something like that. And some companies didn't want at least the corporation they didn't want to host the ads because the ads call out that you're being tracked on that website, and they didn't want to bring attention to that fact. Yeah. So then we kind of internally see that as a badge of honor. Like, yep, we're pushing in the right direction.
To be rejected. No, I completely understand. I think it's an interesting, line to straddle, because at the end of the day, like, no one wants to be doing bad stuff and no one sees themselves as the bad guy, but like there are precarious situations, and like it's important to be honest. So I appreciate that. I value that.
One interesting thing in this is like there's I look at any job I've had as two factors. There's like the work that I'm doing at an individual level and like how interesting that is, and like what challenges I'm solving here. and then the kind of broader picture of like, does the bigger mission give me that warm fuzzy feeling of should I be doing the right thing? And it's a balance to be found wherever you go, because like you might actually find a job somewhere that's like doing something really awesome and it's kind of boring work on a like individual level.
For sure.
But like, you know, if you leave your, you know, it's in the organization's mission, that's cool, but, you know,
Yeah.
so it's a challenge.
Yeah, for sure. I actually, I have a lot of experience with this because I'm a math major, and in the past 10 years, fintech companies and
Especially in New York.
especially in New York have been very heavily targeting my demographic. So it's definitely difficult because we come from an aspirational background and we all want to be academics and we all want to, I don't know, research the subject that we're very passionate about. And sometimes a company comes to you with a lot of money and says, you can do the stuff you want to do, just don't think about anything else. And yeah, it's difficult. I think it's an important conversation to have though, because I definitely understand where that comes from.
Yeah, there's a high likelihood of being targeted by a fintech or a healthcare related
Oh,
company
yeah.
in this city.
Oh yeah,
And
I've been getting those emails.
Yep.
I've been getting those recruiting offers.
I get them, I'm just like, oh, healthcare industry.
I was like, oh my gosh, this is, yeah, it leaves a bad taste.
Yeah.
But no, I completely understand. I guess like before we open the floor for questions, I just wanted to ask just generally like, what do you wish when you were our age? As I hope that question doesn't make you feel old, but like when let people in our age group and students keep in mind going forward about ethics and machine learning in general.
I didn't even know what machine learning was when I was your age, so that's
Also, yeah, the other thing I wanted to ask about really was like the fact that machine learning and AI have become such buzzwords, and they just, I feel like sometimes they're kind of meaningless at this point. But yeah.
I guess one thing I wish I knew was like I just wasn't super aware of the organizing and activism happening when I was in college. I found that later, and which is funny because you think like college is like where it happens. Students do a ton of organizing work, but I just like was not aware. And when the only like political organizations I was aware of were around electoral politics, which I just don't personally find particularly interesting, and the meetup groups I went to were like not super welcoming. So I wish I had like found out more about kind of grassroots organizing and these kinds of issues, because I studied critical theory of technology when I was in college, so like I was interested in this stuff, but then didn't really see how that translated into industry until later.
Yeah.
So I wish I had been having these conversations when I was your age.
Yeah, I wasn't really involved in anything political or just activism related. You know, the first time I think it was my junior or senior year of college was the 2010 when Obama got elected, and you know celebrations all around campus, and I was kind of first like, oh, this is stuff that like I should be paying more attention to, and that understanding of how to advocate for things that you care about translates into the workplace. And I know that there's like a lot of people just want to kind of go in and do their job and keep their heads down.
Sure.
But if you care about something, you've got to be willing to speak up for it. And you know, it doesn't have to be in a way that like jostles feathers. Just asking questions and like putting thoughts in other people's heads about the stuff that you care about is a great way to start. And you know, companies aren't gonna, you know, for just starting those kind of conversations, you're not gonna get in trouble too much, right? I mean, I don't know where the line happens there, but it's important to have those conversations.
Yeah, sure.
And I can think of two things. One is sort of within computer science. I ended up studying both AI and HCI, human computer interaction. And one of the things I learned is when I was doing all my AI courses, machine learning, you know, natural language processing, people are always pursuing the latest, most hip algorithm.
Oh yeah.
But very often the algorithm that will actually make the most, like, and when people talk about AI in general, just like computer science or in general, people always think about this, you know, algorithm that can achieve human level intelligence.
Yeah.
But very often the algorithm that will have the most impact are often the more mundane ones. So if you think about like, you know, the last 20 years or so, Google like search algorithm, if you think about it, it's not that hard. You're taking a string and map it to a document, trying to pick up what is the most relevant document. But that was the most used algorithm. And the Facebook ad targeting algorithm, these are not the most super complex algorithms, but they reach more people. So one of the things as you're moving forward is, think about whether or not you're interested in the technology or interested in impact, and they may not actually be the same thing. The thing that may have more impact might actually be something that's not as sexy in computer science terms, but it will reach more people. So I think that was like the first thing that comes to my mind. And the second thing is I think for me, I really enjoy. So I kind of want to, at least when I was going to school, I enjoyed balancing computer science with the arts. So the arts sort of gave me a lot of perspective. I ended up taking more arts classes during my PhD than the computer science classes. But it definitely helped, in a way that helped me grounded because I can see things from different perspectives. But the technology side also helped me, definitely be good at what you're doing. So for example, during the European Parliament election, when Facebook released this API, I was one of the people who called in the documentation, the thing you're doing is almost right, but just because you're slightly off, you're not actually allowing us to access the ads. So I sort of ended up documenting a large number of bugs in their API because I was technically strong enough to debug their entire system as a third party. So definitely still be very, very good with your skills because that will definitely come in someday. But at the same time, sort of explore other fields, and you never know when the two might connect with one another. And yeah.
Okay, awesome. I think that's all very sound advice. And now, if you guys have any questions, feel free to bring them up. Anything related to transition intelligence.
There were a lot of calls that people should speak up when they see something that's not going right with the company that they work for. But I was just wondering, what are concrete things that you can do when you encounter something like that? I don't know.
Experience here.
I mean, I say it directly. Now, when I started at Google, I'm sure Google still doesn't have Slack. Now I have Slack in my company, so if something is posted in Slack, I will just post it and be like, hey, I feel like that's not okay. When someone's like, hey, we should work with Palantir, I can respond directly to that, and then we can have a discussion, and I prefer to do things face to face. At Google, I feel like a lot of it really does start with your relationships with other people. You need to have other people who are willing to stand up for you as well, because it is really scary and you can get fired if you speak up on your own. So if you see something that you are not comfortable with, try to figure out who else is also not comfortable, and you can have that conversation gently, hey, yeah, this thing that we're being asked to build, what do you think about that? It's kind of strange. Or I have a friend who works at Palantir, and what they did was just, they dropped in a New York Times article or something. And it's hey, what do you all think about this contract with ICE? And then it exploded, because people think a lot about it. So I think you just really need to, don't jump in day one and start being this is wrong, don't build that. You need to spend a few months just getting to know people. People have to trust you, and then they will start to speak up for you and with you. But yeah, I will say it's not just going and screaming. You will probably get fired. But it is about building those connections, investing in the relationships. And it's not usually upwards that happens. It's usually horizontally. So what I'm saying is don't go talk to your manager, go talk to your coworkers.
Non-confrontational communication techniques are good to kind of have in your back pocket. Please correct me if I'm wrong here, but I feel I'm concerned about this, not so much this is stupid. Mm-hmm. There's a balance between I have concerns that this is the wrong direction.
Right.
And I think for me, as Asian male, we're also starting to become almost a non-minority or majority in the tech field. So for me, the way I think about it is more about just when I have a chance, sort of present myself as somebody who will support other people if they do speak to me. And this might be very, very subtle signs. So this is an actual story of some of the computer scientists who went to, I believe, Omaha, Nebraska or somewhere. Like, so one of the things is like, as tech workers who go in there and we might have backgrounds, the person was love these sci-fi movies, so like his entire office would be decorated with sci-fi movies. But we did not realize this as outreach. A lot of the students who might be interested in computer science are not interested in these sci-fis. They did not grow up in such a culture. And by decorating your office in such a way, even though it represents you, it actually ended up, in particular context, turn people off because you present yourself as somebody who they may not listen to what they're talking about. So that's another way I think from my perspective, again, like, I don't know if this is actually working, but I'm trying, is to present myself as somebody who will listen when these things come up.
If I can just add to that, I really like what you just said, because it's also the way you get people to trust you so that you can ask a huge favor of them is to give people favors and to and not like when someone's asking you to do work that's not your work. I mean, like, to be generous with your time, with your advice, with getting lunch with people. If you're in a meeting and there's only one woman, and if you're going into engineering, this would probably happen, but you'll be in a meeting, there'll be only one woman, only one person of color, and someone will say something offensive, you can speak up and say like, hey, like, that's not okay, and they might see you then as an so like, just I guess like always trying to live to your values and be generous and to stand up for other people, and then people will see you as somebody that they can come talk to when they're having issues, and that you can then go and talk to them as well when you're having issues.
That's awesome. Thanks so much. Does anyone?
Do you think that a lot of these issues with companies stem from overriding the ethical side of the problem for the sake of capital gains, or do you think it's more a lack of understanding of the impact of the problem or just not being passionate about fixing it?
Combination. Again, as tech workers, we're often very much in a place of privilege, and so that we're just kind of can be blind to issues that these are causing that are in fact impacting other people, as Anne was saying earlier. I think there's also the capitalism factor of just kind of go for the money if that's the ethos of the company.
Coming from Silicon Valley, my impression was at least 10 years ago, it was more about just a lot of tech workers interested in technology are not as aware. But because tech is now so profitable, there's so much money pouring in, a lot of people are entering tech just for the money. So then, and that brings a completely different perspective. They brought sort of different culture, the kind of culture that you probably previously find on Wall Street to this, to Silicon Valley now. And whether or not, and like, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys heard about, for example, the Uber culture, and some of the corporate cultures are very toxic, and some of those are starting to, I wouldn't say the norm, but that is happening a lot more in Silicon Valley. But again, Silicon Valley is, again, its own sort of self-contained bubble. So I don't know to what extent that represents tech cultures in other cities that are a bit more, that are more multidimensional. So
I guess I might contradict that a little.
Yeah, go ahead.
That I think that a culture existed in Silicon Valley even before any Wall Street types came in, that was always kind of there. I also think it's a combination of all these factors playing together, but and I think it has a lot to do with who's in power, what they look like, and what they care about. And like, people were speaking up about the abuse on Twitter for a very long time, and Twitter, the high up people at Twitter don't care, because that's not abuse that they personally receive, or they don't, or if they do, it's very minimal, and they're like, I don't see why this is a big problem. So I think something, a slight tangent, but something I think a lot about is how we can't solve social issues with technology, and a lot of these issues are because our society is racist and sexist, and that is going to manifest. And so it's not as easy as being like, it's the capital, or it's the ignorance, or it's this. It's kind of everything, and it's the system that we live in, and we kind of constantly have to be vigilant about that.
actually reminds me of this, there was this New Yorker article on, it was profiling like some of the data violations on Facebook. And it was talking about the birth of the company in the 2006 Harvard circles, and talking about how interesting it is to consider how the internet was shaped by a bunch of affluent white 20-something college boys. And I think when you're talking about the culture always kind of being there, and having to build off of that, which is the root of it, it's really interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't help that a lot of like venture capitalists are like looking for the next Mark Zuckerberg, and it's like, well,
Exactly.
right.
The next young boy.
Because that's the story that's worked in the past.
Exactly. Architect, internet story. But yeah, no, thank you for that. Any other questions from anyone? Yeah.
So I have a little personal experience with that. So I got an internship over the summer, but it's not in US. And I find there is some issues in the company. So I tried like just kindly talk to the other people, but all the other people are saying that just don't you mention it, like it's not your thing. And like if you don't want to be fired or you don't want to risk yourself, you just keep silent. So I feel like it's more like, you know, like most people are at the bottom of those huge tech companies. So I think, well, for most people they just won't, you know, they don't want the risk to be fired. So I think they will prefer to just keep silence, even though like they are thinking about something. Yeah, I just have some personal experience.
Yeah, I guess what I was saying earlier, I should probably dial back a little bit again, kind of consider where I'm coming from and my experience with not as big tech companies. So that's absolutely a valid like thing. Like when you have to be concerned about your, you know, livelihood, like what is it, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know, you've got to worry about those bottom items on the pyramid. Like you can't be as concerned with pushing these things forward. But I think that goes back to what you were saying about talk to the people that work with you.
If everyone that you talk to, like, I'm sure you didn't talk to everyone at the company, keep talking to more people. I'm sure somebody thinks the way you do. And I guess something else I would ask is like, because working in tech we do have a lot of privilege, like, is it so bad if you get fired? You maybe like if that is what you need to do, if you need to speak up, if you need to post your open letter or whatever to point something out, like maybe that's also an option, is to walk away from something that you think is incredibly unethical. And yeah, that's not always an option. If you cannot find another job, if you have a visa that's tied to the job, healthcare, whatever it is, it's not always an option, but it can be an option, and a lot of people do that. They walk away because it's just, you know, something that they can't handle anymore.
When you have the privilege, use it, but to better others.
Yeah.
Yes.
In what way can you use your privilege?
As I said, like talking to these companies, like if you've got a job, talk to these companies. Don't be afraid to be bold with them. Maybe wait until you're past the recruiter call and like talk to the right people. Heck, get into companies that you feel aren't completely poisoned, and start pushing for change there and being vocal there. And you know, I'm in the fortunate spot to be financially stable. That if I ended up not having a job for a reasonable period of time, I would be fine. And so I'm like less concerned now as if I was to go elsewhere, what the, cost of pushing for the change I want to see might be. Do you have any other suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you feel that you can speak up, do. And for a lot of people in tech, like we do have other jobs that are on offer, so you can choose not to work at this tech company because you want to work at this other one that you feel is more ethical, or a foundation, or like an open source, or I don't know, open source projects, if people get a job there. There, I guess what I'm saying is that a lot of the times when I'm talking to other tech workers who are afraid of organizing, it's kind of a fear of the unknown, or just like a general fear of precarity in the United States, because we don't have a social safety net if you are unemployed or if you have healthcare needs or something. But for a lot of us, like, those fears are like it's more like a fear of not being in this super comfortable middle class life, and maybe like that's kind of okay to, if you need to walk away.
What you were saying earlier too, like demonstrate to people that you kind of show who you are and what you value, and build that trust in people that maybe you can end up speaking up for people who can't speak up for themselves.
Yeah, I find like I'm a non-white woman, and I feel like I'm always the one pushing for a lot of these issues, which is really frustrating when all the white men around me say they care, but they are not doing anything. And so it's like in that like small situation, you appear to be a man. I'm reading you again. So you have more privilege than me in certain situations. Use that if you have that opportunity.
With some people who don't look like you.
Yes.
Could you tell us more about the activism efforts that you were mentioning earlier?
Say that again?
Could you tell us more about the activism efforts that you were mentioning earlier?
The activism that I do?
Yeah.
So tech worker organizing is part of it. So I organize with various groups, but was doing a lot of work against tech companies that were signing contracts with ICE. So in solidarity with immigrants, particularly undocumented folks, to push back against these tech companies that are doing unethical things. And let's see, what else? Yeah, I think it's mostly been a lot of like anti-ICE thing, a lot of stuff against building the new jails in New York City as well. So yeah, that kind of stuff.
This is on a different subject, but working at Mozilla, do you have preference for Firefox versus Chrome?
I mean, I do use both, so actually I fit a very, very typical profile of people who use two browsers to separate work and home, personal use, which is what I was studying fun too. Yeah, but this might sound patronizing, but I do love the tracking protection on Firefox. I kind of have wished I'd done it the other way, so that my tracking protection is on my home account as opposed to
Yeah.
Yeah, my favorite is the Facebook container that I open Facebook and it's automatically in a new tab that's like completely isolated from the rest of your browsing. Problem is it doesn't carry over to your phone, so like if you open the phone, I mean, there's that, but like at least my desktop browsing is isolated for Facebook. I open Chrome like once in a blue moon when I'm like testing something. Honestly, I have my computer's actually set to use, at least when I configured it a year or so ago, Safari when I'm on battery life, unplug because I get better battery life on Safari. I think that got fixed recently.
Is that right?
I heard, so I need to reevaluate that.
And just FYI, like on the topic of building technology that's completely mundane, one of the new features in Firefox is called Lockwise, which basically means you can actually just copy and paste your password from Firefox. And very often when I'm using a phone app, it's not in a browser, so I need to type in my password, and all my saved password doesn't work that way. But having a copy and paste function solves so many problems. And yeah, and I mean copy and paste, so trivial, but it has a huge impact in terms of technology and how users use that technology.
So there's an argument to some of these AI problems, like for example, YouTube recommendations and stuff, that the response to it is to simply build better AI. Like for example, like the reason why YouTube recommendations are racist or something is because their AI does make really bad generalizations that don't hold to be true. So if you just make it a little bit better, add some other features, it'll become better, and all those biases will go away. what do you guys have to say against this argument?
Are you familiar with the good, fast, cheap triangle? Where you can choose two. If you're a customer, you're ordering something, you're having something made, you can choose two of those. Kind of goes back to that statement earlier about optimizing for money. Well, if you're gonna build that AI to like do something better, you're then probably taking away from that drive to focus as much on hours. So it all kind of goes back to the same argument. And I also think that there's an element of not all problems can be solved with more technology. Like there's just certain social problems that we need to address.
And I think another way to look at AI, or at least machine learning specifically, is I mentioned it's a tool, and more specific, it's a tool to automate tasks. And so not everything can be automated. Like when you automate something, you have to sort of put everything into a box so that everything fits some pattern, so you can do that, so you can repeat that pattern very, very rapidly. So I think of it as like, go back to, I don't know, like restaurants, when you have fast food, like McDonald's can churn out so many servings is because they have a very standard burger and they can churn out very, very rapidly. But it's hard to cook a delicious, nutritious meal in that fashion. So the same way, this AI is in a very similar way. Like AI just means rather than having one professional translator to help you translate, Google Translate aggregated millions of documents, if not more, so that is probably right 90-95% of the time because it fits that pattern. But if you fall off that pattern, then you're not, like, the algorithms do something that's completely wrong. So you'll never be able to model the entire world into that, fit the entire world into that model. And so the thing is, so a few things you can think about is AI will always make a mistake because, again, you can never fit the world into that model. And think about who's being impacted more, because people who are less similar to the norm will tend to be the people who fall off that model. And also, when you build a model, it's very often built from the modeler's perspective. So, like when people create an algorithm that predicts, for example, in Los Angeles, to help police track down whether or not they should stop a car and pull them over. They model that on historical data that only, that's not actually representative of, the actual incident. So basically, police end up pulling over a lot of people of color because the model told them that the car should be pulled over. And so those are the things that will make AI make a wrong decision. And so I would say, and that's the part where human has to intervene. So very often when people write these algorithms, they only wrote it so that they assume everything's going to work 100% of the time, and there's no way to catch that error. I don't know if I'm making sense, or like when I say making errors, for example, very often when people are building, when people say self-driving cars, a lot of times the people starting from the AI world think about this ideal world when the car can drive itself 100% of the time, you can take the driver out. But if you start from the actual real world problems, you might think about traffic accidents. There might be a lot of ways to fix, to reduce traffic fatality from traffic accidents. That doesn't require you to build a car that's working 100% of the time. And when you have a car that drives, it's when you design with a model that assumes AI is going to work 100% of the time, which it cannot. That means somebody has to still sit at the steering wheel to correct for that error 1% of the time or 0.1% of the time. And those are the problems that's unresolved because AI, the whole car is built to assume it's going to be 100% correct, and there's no way for you to intervene. So those are very often the kind of things you can think about as you're moving forward, is like how to build AI that actually supports people and not assume this is 100% working AI and you're trying to figure out how people fit into AI, but really think about what are the real problems in the world and build AI to solve those specific problems. I don't know if I'm making sense or...
Does anyone have any other questions?
When you were in your presentation earlier, you had this concept that people should be able to verify what the AI did.
Yeah.
And you showed that the example of the translation.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a really interesting concept. I was just wondering if you had any more examples of applications where you can verify what the AI did?
Yeah, so some of them come in very, very subtle ways, so subtle that you may not realize that took, like 5 to 10 years of research. So one thing is like, you think about just going back to Google, like the earliest versions of Google, you type a word, you get a document. And people realize that even that step is, if you can just provide real-time feedback as a drop-down menu, so you can see, as you're typing, give you a bunch of choices of, these are the things that the AI actually understands. Like Google actually doesn't understand every single word, but the autocomplete gives you a little bit of feedback of these are the terms the AI understands. So you can bridge the language between human and or whatever is indexed. That itself, I don't know how often when you're doing search, you actually use autocomplete. Like that is one of the algorithms that people use. It's not the same verification as I was mentioning earlier, but it allows you to sort of bridge the gap between the human, like what we understand and what machine understands. Some of the other things that, let me see. That's sort of like the first example that comes to my mind. There are other things that are, so one of the other things that I ended up working on is called topic modeling. So when you have a large number of documents, like 1 million documents, you want to help people understand what's in the document. Researchers have also tried to come up with algorithms to help people really quickly skim 1 million documents. So I was building these tools, and these are very specialized tools, mostly used by researchers. And there, the idea would be try to get a sense of, the AI will always, the statistical topic model will always give you a top of documents, but I try to run the model like 250,000 times, just so that the researcher can see a bit of variations, to see, oh, this is actually just anomaly that happened in one model. This is actually what will happen if I run the model more consistently. And that also gives you sort of, some of the idea of like the failure modes of, what are the things that the researcher should know, but it's not captured by the AI. So part of the tools that we build, we always have the ability for people to correct the model. And that's actually very interesting when you see people correcting the model. It's like, oh, that's the things that we actually missed. So as a model builder, you are seeking sort of user feedback. I don't know if I'm answering your original question about verification, but those are sort of like the.
Yeah, no, I think that was really interesting.
Yeah, and it can also be very subtle ways. So for example, a lot of these models sort of break down all the documents into individual words. But essentially, as a human, it's very hard to to read the list of words. So some of the tools I built try to sort of statistically reconstruct the words so they become phrases, and that can also make the model more interpretable to humans.
I guess it might not be entirely topical, but like what kind of in industry, what kind of like privacy violations do you find are like the most common? I guess like what like culturally speaking, what kind of things do you see companies do the most often that I as a student I guess should be looking out for when I like want to avoid evil?
I guess what I've seen personally at like every place I've been at is just exposing all user data. And just like if you work there, you can just go around and poke around everything, see people's email addresses and their billing information or whatever, and that's like really bad. And you should hide and anonymize that, except for the people who definitely need to see it. So yeah, definitely just if you see lots of user data, like, ask them why it's exposed like that.
Yeah, should we test environments and things like that with fake data, or at least anonymized to a healthy extent. Again, nothing that I've like seen firsthand, but I had something that came to mind. Just generally things that are like, well, this isn't technically illegal, but it sure seems weird. Like, it's stuff like that that like you just look at and you have to say like, does this feel like it should be allowed? Congress or like lawmakers in general are behind the curve on a lot of this stuff, and so one of the big things that that the whole tech industry had to prepare for last year was the enactment of the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, European data privacy rules. Mozilla was already like a lot of the way there because that's just aligned with the stuff that we believe in anyway. But that was kind of the first real, legislative action that really had broad impact on the industry. And I think, there's gonna be more of that to come. It might come at a state level, because our current Congress is not able to do things. I think that just kind of weird things happen, and that is not technically illegal, but needs to be addressed, and could be from anything from, again, like exposing user data to others in the company that don't need to have permission, to just collecting weird bits of metadata. And as innocuous as it might seem, metadata can be put together to form a picture of somebody that tells a tale. My favorite example that our CTO, or sorry, not CTO, our executive director used to give is like, you can capture metadata about like phone calls, and if somebody calls a 1-900 number and spends 2.5 minutes on the phone, like that's just metadata. You don't know what they talked about, but you can infer a lot of information about that. So just what types of data is captured is something to watch out for.
I think that's also interesting because I think there was a poll I read somewhere that after the Snowden revelations, a lot of Americans don't think that level of access to metadata is that bad. But as you just mentioned, you can glean a lot from various bits of metadata about someone's life. And it's interesting that that's not really talked about as being important.
Yeah. On the metadata front, another story that comes to mind is, I have various friends that are in, mental health, like helping out with mental health, like social work, things like that. And because of the way Facebook triangulates who it might suggest you be friends with, they'll see their clients, or their clients will see them pop up, even if they have their names, like if the mental health workers have their names as like, fake last names on Facebook and other ways to kind of obfuscate their identity because of location data. It's like, oh look, you spent a lot of time in the same place. Like, let's suggest your friends. It's like, what? No, that should not happen. And yet,
It's not just like, it's crazy. But I guess we're running out of time, so if anyone has any last questions they want to get in there.
I think at NYU there's a place called the AI Now Institute. I think it's in NYU. You should check it out. There are people thinking about this stuff there. And I think NYU also hosts a conference called FATML, Fairness and Transparency in Machine Learning. You should also check that out.
Awesome. We'll send that out. Definitely.
Get that survey just up on the URL for the survey.
Yeah. So your boy's falling asleep. It's gonna get that. We can write it on the board as well.
Oh. The chalk is fine.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
URL/feedback canvas AI?
Feedback chemistry.
You're gonna have me running a board.
But thank you guys for coming. This was really fun. I feel like it's been my tech season sort of sparse, but this is going to be on YouTube too. So if you have any friends that want to check this out after, definitely subscribe to our channel, guys. But and